Hey there, my friend. It's Tricia Carr. Real quick before we head into this episode, I just want to make sure that you know about Modern Mystic Life, a subscription service for spiritual mentoring and education. The monthly subscription is only $11.11 per month. We have regular support and inspiration delivered with the utmost ease right into your text messenger 2 to 4 times per week. You can use your mobile device or your desktop messenger to access the lessons and meditations, a monthly MP3 download of a produced meditation, at least once per month live meditation led by me. There is no account login, and we have a monthly live class workshop. These are usually $35 for non-subscribers, so it is quite a deal. And the community is amazing. This is a way for you to support the Charmed Life podcast and also a way for us to be able to work more closely together. So do check out how you can subscribe in the show notes. I hope to see you there. Hello and welcome to the Charmed Life podcast. This podcast is all about magic, metaphysics, mysticism, and the unconditional love of the universe. And I am your host. My name is Tricia Carr. This episode is a conscious conversation with a very special guest, Alyse Bacine. I was on Alyse's podcast. Actually, as I'm recording this now, the episode hasn't been published yet, but I imagine it will be soon. But she has a wonderful podcast called Reclaiming Consciousness. And this conversation is just so rich with so many things that I think those of us who would be here listening to a podcast like this are going through about, healing trauma, about being able to facilitate others as helpers, healers, guides, entrepreneurs, and just changing your life. Alyse shares with us about how she made a major shift in her life to be able to commit to her real, true calling. So let me tell you about Alyse. And before I do that, I want to share with you that I would love for you to make sure that you join my newsletter, which you can find by in the show notes. You'll find a way to click through, join that newsletter, because I do have now, my programs are on a regular schedule. We have multidimensional mediumship starting in late June. And then we have animal communication starting again in August. So you will be able to best be on top of when those enrollments are open and how you can sign up for them if you join the newsletter. I mention it here on the podcast as much as possible, but that's the best way to do it. Of course, you can be visiting my website so you can see the different, current programs that are happening. And I just want to tell you that these two signature programs of mine, animal communication and multidimensional mediumship, are my signatures. They are my babies. I am also going to be teaching multiple week programs on energy healing and channeling and other workshops here and there. And of course, I have my subscription, my very low-cost, high-value subscription, Modern Mystic Life, where we have 2 live offerings every month. And then we have weekly, 2 to 4 times per week. We get a little bit of exclusive content to be able to keep you inspired and on your path as a modern mystic. But back to animal communication, that is the way that I opened my spiritual gifts in a conscious way. It was through the doorway of telepathically communicating and healing animals. So it is my heart. And then that led directly into mediumship, and then multidimensional mediumship, as I call it, because in addition to communicating and receiving the guidance and the healing and the fulfillment with your loved ones who are the former humans, the past humans, we also learn and facilitate the conversation, the communion that you can have with your guides of light in other dimensions of light, including angels, interdimensionals, masters, and to put you online with this spirit team of yours, and to be able to give those kinds of readings and facilitate others in their communion with their spirit teams. So those are my 2 signature programs, my babies, that I have on a regular schedule now. So again, check out Animal Communication happening in August again, and then check out Multidimensional Mediumship starting in late June. All right, let's talk about Alyse and this incredible conversation. Alyse Bacine is a breathwork practitioner, spiritual mentor, and the CEO of Alyse Breathes LLC. She has her master's in counseling psychology and certifications in both social emotional learning and mindfulness practices, as well as an extensive background in the mental health field. Knowing that she wanted to expand her mission of healing familial and ancestral trauma and normalizing breathwork and meditation practices, she started Alyse Breathes and quickly became a six-figure mentor. Alyse's programs are deeply rooted in healing so women can navigate work, love, and life as powerful leaders without the burden of trauma playing a role in delaying their highest potential. She has been featured in prestigious publications like the Oprah Magazine, Nylon, Well and Good, and Yahoo, and has assisted hundreds of high achievers in their ascension journey. Really a powerful conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, as I'm sure you will as well. So welcome to this conscious conversation with Alyse Bacine, and I will chat with you on the other side. Alyse, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. We've already chatted on your podcast, Reclaiming Consciousness. That's right, right?
Yes.
That's okay. And your company is Alyse Breathes.
Yes.
So, I mean, everything that you are up to, I just think your work is so beautiful, so valuable, so helpful. And I'm really excited to bring you to my audience. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
And we had so much fun talking on your podcast. So pretend like you don't know me, or I don't know you, I should say. And would you get everyone into the magic of Alyse? Let us know about your journey and the work that you're doing, wherever you want to start.
Yeah. So, for me, it's pretty much been a lifelong journey. I think for my whole life, I always kind of knew that I was tuned into something else. I didn't quite know how to put that into words, and I never really shared it with anyone when I was younger. But when I was 19, I found myself really on a journey of self discovery because I was struggling with an eating disorder and anxiety and just wanting to know answers for why I was experiencing certain things. And that's when I really started going down my, spiritual path, so to speak. So I discovered yoga and then quickly discovered breath work. And when I discovered breath work, I just knew that I was supposed to do it. I didn't really even understand why. And again, I was only 19. So I did it and I didn't even have that, crazy of an experience, but I just knew that I was supposed to do it. So there's a really amazing breathwork community here in Philadelphia, and I just started doing everything that they offered. They offered these breathworker training programs and these different workshops, and I just did all of it, and I became a breathwork facilitator at a really young age. And I taught groups and I had private clients. And it just was a huge part of my life. And it's always been a huge part of my life, even though life took me in other directions. I don't think I had the wherewithal when I was that young to start my own business, even though I kind of did it on the side. But I ended up getting my master's degree in counseling psychology. I was a school counselor for 10 years, working, as a mental health professional in schools, working with traumatized children. And and I also created meditation programs for them, and I did breath work with them. So I always incorporated it into my life, and it was always something that was a huge part of my life. And I always knew that at some point I would be doing something else. I knew that as a school counselor, I was only utilizing probably about 10% of my gifts and abilities. I just didn't know exactly what that was going to be or what that was going to look like. But then in late 2019, I really got the push. I had gotten a new school counseling job after being at the same job for 7 years. And um, I just knew that I thought that was going to be the answer. And then once I got there, I realized it wasn't. And it was funny because that job would have been everything on my like manifestation list. It was everything that I would have wanted. But then when I got there, I realized that it wasn't actually what I wanted. So I had a really strong pull to start working with a coach at that time. And I did. And that's when I realized that I wanted to start my business. And when I started my business, I thought it was just going to be about breath work because that's all I ever have done. That was the main thing that I did. But then it just quickly evolved into so many other things. So that was at the beginning of 2020. And then in March of 2020, I was
Something
sent
happened.
home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something happened. We were all sent home.
Yeah. So I basically had all of this time then to focus on my business. And actually, I went home from school in March of 2020 and I actually never went back. So we were virtual for, the rest of that year. And then I did go back to my job in the fall of 2020, but I ended up leaving in December of 2020. So I've been full time in my business since January of 2021. And it's just grown in so many ways that I couldn't even have predicted or imagined. And I just came to understand myself and my own abilities and what I meant to do here on the planet in such a profound way. And it all just kind of blossomed and opened up, once I started down that path. And it's funny because when I always say that, and I feel like it makes it sound like it was really easy, but it wasn't.
Of course. Yeah. Well, did it feel like a leap for you, or did it feel like a slow transition, or did it feel like both? Like,
It
that
felt
it.
like both, when
Mhm.
I was doing it and in my job at the same time, it definitely felt slower, but then I think I got to the point where I just knew I couldn't be a school counselor anymore,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
and I see this with people all the time because now I've coached like so many women in leaving their jobs and starting their own businesses. It's like you have this idea of what you think it's gonna look like when you leave your job, like, "Oh, once I'm making, $10,000 a month, then I'll leave my job," and it's like, it never really happens that way,
Yeah.
Like, for
Yeah.
me, I was nowhere near the point where it made sense for me to go, but
Yeah.
I just knew within my soul that that's what I needed to do, and at the same time, I had signed up to work with a mentor where I was gonna be paying her more per month than I was even making in my job. And I also was like, "How am I gonna do this?" But I just knew. Like, I just knew that I was supposed to do that. I knew that I was supposed to leave my job. I didn't know how any of it was gonna work, but I just knew that that was what was supposed to happen. So it was definitely a leap. It was definitely scary, but I also just knew. And so it's
Mhm.
weird because it's
Yeah.
like, it was definitely scary,
Mhm.
and I continue to do the scary things that I know I'm meant to do. So I think that just ends up being part of the path of growth and expansion and growing my business in the way I desire. And now I'm just more used to that, right? But I think it's always kind of this, okay, I know this. I don't have to understand how. Yes, it feels scary because I'm pushing myself beyond what feels comfortable to me, beyond what I know, but I also just have to trust that this is what I'm meant to do.
And I wonder if the knowing that you're talking about, it's more of an embodied awareness than trying to think something, you know what I mean? The distinction
Totally.
between conscious and subconscious and being fully embodied in something. That's what I'm feeling. And when you say I just knew, even though I'm still scared and the scariness is in the logical, like it's illogical. There's no logic to
Exactly.
what exists already.
And I'm one of those people that I don't always rely on logic. So I think I've been lucky in that way because I'm really good at just knowing without having to explain anything. And sometimes that gets me in trouble, right? Because like sometimes my husband will be like, "Well, why did you do that?" And I'm like, "I have no idea. I literally didn't even think about why I did that. And if I would have thought about it, maybe I would have done something differently, right? Just with regular life stuff."
Yeah.
But with this, it worked out for me because I just had to follow my knowing and I didn't
Mhm.
need to know. But I've always been really connected to just my intuition and I always just know things immediately.
Are you splenic?
So
Are you a splenic authority? You're human design. I think we talked
no,
about it on
I'm
yours.
an emotional
Oh,
no, wait,
okay.
no, sacral, sacral,
You're
sacral.
sacral. Okay, yeah, that's immediate.
Yeah.
That's even more well, it's not
Yeah.
more immediate than spleen, but it's very immediate. And it is a body knowing. And it's like
Mhm.
the body being able to go, So
Yeah,
that
and
makes
it's
so much
funny because
sense.
sometimes I'll have that, but then, like, knowing scares my brain, so then
Of
I'm
course.
like, "Okay, just give me a day or so, so my brain can get used to the thing that my body already knows is a yes."
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's the thing. So for splenic authorities, theirs is very immediate and it fades. Like it fades, like they get the now and then they
Mhm.
can't feel it like a few minutes later or something. Like I think with at least with sacral, you keep tapping in and it's still there. And
Yeah.
that's beneficial. And so the people that I know who are splenic authority, they can, because of the scary brain, the scary mind, it can talk them out of that immediate
The
knowing.
knowing,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so they have to almost do leap of faith every time they feel it.
Yeah.
The sacral is so beautiful. Sacral authority is so beautiful because it's like a divination device too. It moves you. It moves you from your body to places and it's also magnetic. So, it pulls people to you, pulls things to you.
Yeah.
So that's really beautiful. So it did feel both like slow when you're doing the old job with the new job or the new passion, the correct thing for you. That feels like 1,000 years. And I like how you said it's not really going to happen. Maybe it does for some people, of course, but thinking that you need to make 10 or 20K per month in the new business before you can leave the old one, may not be able to do that because you're still giving to the old business. And you're literally the resources of you and the resources of your manifestation energy and everything is consumed by that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and this is the way I like to describe it, and it's funny because I actually had a conversation yesterday with a client about this. So for me, what I started to notice is that the person that I had to be as a school counselor was so incongruent with the
Hmm.
person I had to be in my business. Like the version of of me in my business and the version of me as a school counselor were so incongruent that it was just hard for me to be both people
Yeah.
and it took so much of my energy. And
Yeah.
it's funny because I was talking to a client about this yesterday, and she does hair, and she's been growing her business, but also doing hair, which technically takes less time, right, than what I was doing because I had to work 5 days a week. However, when she told me her actual hours that she was working, I was like, oh, well, you're bottlenecked. Like, there's no way you can grow your business if you're still doing hair that much. Like, it just
Hmm.
didn't the energetics of it just didn't make sense, even though, yes, she wanted to be further along. But energetically, it's just you have to kind of be two different people. And it gets to a point where you just can't do that anymore and still have the capacity to grow. It just, the two things just can't happen from an energetic perspective.
Right. So it's the old job, hairdressing or school counseling, is sapping your energy, but then the just having to resolve the incongruency between the two identities is another energy sap, and it's just
Yeah.
it's taking away from that new or the proper venture to be able to have your full self in
Yeah.
it. So there's this a suspension of just reality in a way when you cut it off.
Mhm.
And it's a really walking in faith for a
It
bit.
is, and it's
Mhm.
really trusting your knowing, and it really requires, a level of presence too. I think for
Yes.
me, it's just like, okay, just being present in each moment without needing to know exactly how everything was gonna work out, while still being open to possibility and
Yeah.
being able to manage the discomfort in that, right? So I think that's why it's so important to have mentors, healers, and
Mhm.
people that you can lean on in this process because I wouldn't recommend doing it on your own, that's for
Yeah.
sure. You know, it's
Mhm.
it's it's something that you really need support around because there's so much that comes up eh, in the process, right? Because you're
Yeah.
literally what I would see too for myself, and I'm sure other people can relate to this, is there are these moments when I can feel myself rising above my ancestors, right? Like rising
Mhm.
above where they've gotten to, and
Yeah.
in the process clearing the programming and the trauma that that held them in that space. And when I was leaving my job, my parents were both teachers, and my
Mhm.
parents both worked in the school district of Philadelphia, which is where I was working.
Mhm.
And when I made that decision to leave, there was so much that came up around just like the lineage and the loyalty to the family and the lineage, and what it meant for me to break free from that lineage and do something different. And I think that's where a lot of the fear came in, because it almost feels like the only way I can equate it to is like you're floating alone in space
Mhm.
without
Mhm.
anything tethering you, right? Because when we have the ancestral lines, like it feels like we're tethered to something,
Yeah.
something's holding us in this reality. And then every time I've broken free, it feels like this level of like, where you're
Yes.
kind of, you know,
Suspended. That's why I think I used to
suspended.
use the word
Yeah.
suspended, and you're just have to be you just have to you have to be there. Yeah.
And that was I think a lot of the discomfort that came up for me, especially initially. And then it's happened at other times too, where I can feel that I'm expanding what I'm capable of holding. I'm expanding my business, my income, and all of that. And I can feel the discomfort of, another level of transmuting past,
Mhm.
where they left off, kind of a
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah, see, it's like wherever our unresolved or where our trauma, the things that are unresolved, the things that are calling us to heal it, that will be projected onto something like money or relationship, whichever one is the
Yeah,
cherry, the thing that you want. So for you,
exactly.
staying with the ancestry and your actual literal caregivers, because I mean we're all our inner child who cannot leave the family, even if the family's abusive or something. You still have to map yourself to the family because children are relationally dependent, of course, as you well know. So you had to sever that in order to free your new business, your future. You had to free your
Yeah.
future by healing the past, and it literally took you exiting the past, exiting your ancestors. But then that healing that you do flows backward in the timeline to the ancestors,
Mhm.
which is so
Yeah,
beautiful. We actually
it
heal
is.
them. Mhm.
Yeah, and I see that all the time with my clients, when they do that, and that healing that occurs on so many levels, and in so many ways it's what we agreed to do when we came here. And I see that for almost everybody,
Mhm.
pretty much everybody that I work with, that, they agreed to do that and do it on many levels when they
Yeah.
came in. So it's
Yeah.
really an amazing thing to witness, even though it doesn't always feel amazing.
Yeah. It's scary. It is scary.
Yeah.
This is such an important conversation we're having because there are so many people who would be listening to this, of course, but there are so many people who are moving into an entrepreneurial and to a healing and to creative, intuitive, artistic, whatever it is, but forging their independent path to be in alignment with who they truly are. There's so much
Mhm.
more of that individuation that is occurring. And, honestly, the pandemic supported that. They had that,
Yeah.
during the pandemic, people didn't want to go back. They called it the big quit or the big resignation because
Yeah.
people are like, oh, it turns out I hated my job. I don't want to go
Right.
back. you know
Yeah.
you were fortunate that you already had the new passion flowing. You already had the grounding of it.
Mhm.
I imagine there were people who didn't even know that they wanted to do something else until they were severed from it because of the pandemic. But it's such an important that's like just on a muggle or mundane level, but in the spiritual awareness, we know that there's such a grand awakening happening, and that this shift that is occurring is calling people like us into a new thing that has to be a career, just because you have to set up the structure that will allow people to be able to access your work and your healing and your guidance. And so yeah, just so many people are being called into that. So tell us about breath work is a big part of your work, I'm sure, too, but tell us all
Mhm.
about your business. Because we just talk about the business that you went to the business, but I want to hear exactly
Yeah.
what you do.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely evolved. So like I said, I started out just doing breath work.
Mhm.
And then and I'll just kind of tell you the evolution of it because I think it's interesting the way, because for so many people, I think they need to know
Yeah,
everything when they start. And that's really not true. You
it's
really
so
only
true.
need to know step one,
Mhm.
because it'll evolve in ways that you can't imagine, which my like if you would have told me that I would be teaching about money, I would have been like, haha, yeah, whatever.
My
And now I
parents are
teach about
teachers.
money. So yeah, like no. So yeah, so I started out with just teaching breath work. And then when I created my first group program, the Metamorphosis, I thought that that was going to be like all of these tools to help you with breath work. But what ended up happening is I didn't even realize what I was creating. But what I ended up creating was this incredibly potent program to heal familial and ancestral trauma and
Yeah.
understand your purpose in a deeper way. And once people started going through the program, I was like, oh, like I didn't really realize it until people started going through and I saw what was happening. And
Mhm.
I was like, oh, wow, I am facilitating these deep healings of familial and ancestral trauma, and people are understanding who they really are in ways that they hadn't before.
Mhm.
Even if, there would be some people that would realize their purpose and then start a business, and some people who already had businesses but understood themselves in a much different way because they cleared these patterns. They understood what they were playing out. They understood the unconscious beliefs that they were playing out, so they would completely change their lives. So I was like, "Oh, okay. So I am helping people clear familial and ancestral trauma." So, and then what ended up happening was as that evolved, I was like, "Wow, I want as many people as possible to have access to these tools that I've created because the combination of the trauma clearing tools that I've created around your relationships, along with the breath work, along with the energy work that I've created and this trauma framework that I've come up with, I was like, I want as many people as possible to have access to this because I truly believe this is how we change the world.
Yeah.
I 100% don't
Mhm.
understand how we could ever change things without people healing from within. I
Mhm.
don't see that as a possibility. So to me it was so important for me to allow this work to have as big of an impact as it possibly could. So then I created my certification program so I could teach other people how to do this work, right? So
Yeah.
then I created the Metamorphosis Method, which is my certification program. So there I'm teaching you how to facilitate trauma informed breath work, how to channel energy work, and how to use the tools from the Metamorphosis to facilitate trauma clearing and transmutation within your clients. So then that was born, right? So now I
Yeah.
have my certification program, which I freaking love because I feel like it's literally like going on like a trip every day, every time we come on a call where I'm just like diving so deep into, the way that I do things and how to look at things and how to clear things and all of that. So that's probably one of the most fun. I mean, I love all my programs, but it's so much fun. And people are able to take that methodology and apply it to whatever it is that they're doing, and just make it that much more potent. So yeah, so then that came about. And then what ended up happening with all of the women who went through the metamorphosis is they all then had their own businesses and they just wanted to grow their businesses. So then I created my mastermind called Accelerated Wealth, which is specifically for women who own businesses and want to continue clearing the trauma and the blocks that come up as they grow their businesses. So, especially that ancestral piece, like I was talking about, when it comes to like growing your business, growing your income beyond what your ancestors have done, this mastermind is specifically for support around growing your business and all of that stuff that comes up, and just this amazing support system in being a spiritual entrepreneur. So yeah, so then that came about. So it was just kind of like an evolution of what, what people were needing and kind of just allowing my work to evolve in many ways. And then obviously there's other little things I do. I have private clients and all of that for mentorship. But that's kind of the crux of it. So it just has kind of evolved over time. But with everything I do, there's always the element of breath work, because for me, what I've found is that helps people not only gain a ton of momentum in their lives, but it also connects them to who they really are in a way that I just don't see anything else doing. And
Mhm.
I think for me, that's why I feel like I've been so connected to myself. I mean, I think obviously there's a way that I came in this way, but also because of doing breath work at such a young age, I feel like I just always knew myself in such a deep way because the breath work facilitates that. So that's just kind of been at the backbone of everything I do. And now I also have my membership, which is a monthly breathwork session that I teach live, because I feel so passionately about breath work in general. So that's kind of the crux of it, the long and the short of it.
Beautiful. So amazing. I love that you mentioned in especially how when you are training breath work about being trauma informed. And I think that is, while on the one hand, I think that, we all have natural abilities and gifts that we are bringing online, but I also think that having proper training around certain things is really important. You're highly qualified having the counseling background, the counseling education.
Yeah.
So being trauma informed for the audience, it's something we have to be aware of. Being trauma informed along the lines of we can't move someone to open up a trauma if they aren't well resourced to be able to process it at the time. Even though as the counselor, facilitator, intuitive, we can see where they're going and what they are healing, they may not be well resourced for it. And, as a hypnotherapist, I have to be aware of that. With breath work, there are certain kinds of breath work. If a person is in a state of, accessing trauma, they're not totally well resourced to process, certain kinds of breath work techniques would get them stuck in a way, wouldn't it? So can you
Yeah.
explain that? I just wanted to explain my concept, my
Yeah.
background of the question, because I know you know all of this, but yes, can you talk
Yeah.
about being trauma informed and
Yes,
breath work?
definitely,
Mhm.
definitely, and I'm glad you brought this up because I think this term is a way, like, overused in the coaching industry, and I think a lot of people don't even know what it actually means or what it means to be trauma informed.
Yes, and it makes me nervous when I see someone going, "I'm a trauma coach," and I'm, like, looking at their qualifications, and I don't mean I literally do this, but if I do and I'm like, "But you don't have the training to work with
You don't
trauma.
have
You
the
just
training.
your
Yeah,
own overcoming your own trauma doesn't mean that," you know what I mean?
doesn't
So
mean I mean,
yeah,
that's great that you
yeah,
have overcome your own trauma. I do
yes,
think that's a piece of it, but it's not all of it.
it's not.
But I do but to just to start there, I will say that, to be truly trauma informed, you have to be 100% dedicated and willing to continuously dive deep within your own personal
Yes,
growth process. You
yes.
have to be. You can't ever
Mhm.
think that that you have it all figured out or that you've done all the work or whatever. There's always more, and it's always a place to be humble in the sense of like knowing that there's always stuff you don't know, right? So that's
Mhm.
one piece of it, is just being willing all the time to look at yourself, because if you're not, then you can't really hold space for other people in a real way that is beneficial.
Mhm.
So there's that piece of it. And then also, I do think that there is a real training that needs to happen where you understand what trauma looks like and how to pinpoint trauma, right? So for me, I have 10 plus years experience working with traumatized children. Like,
Mhm.
I understand what trauma
Yeah.
looks like and how it presents and what it might not look like, in the sense of, like, I worked with so many kids that I knew things that had happened to them, but if you talk to them or you just interacted with them, you would never know, right? So
Right.
trauma prevents in so many different ways. So there are very specific things that you need to know about to look for, that you might not just right, just you might not know unless somebody
Mhm.
was telling you, right? So
Mhm.
um, it really takes a level of skillfulness and things that you actually need to be able to be aware of and know, and being able to look at what somebody's telling you and see where the trauma is within that, and then be able to look at everything else they're telling you through a certain lens so that you can be of highest service to them. And that's one of the things that I really focus on with my clients in the certification is you need to be able to listen differently to what people are saying, and then you need to be able to look at the things that they're telling you and connect the dots in a very specific way that most people don't, that you wouldn't regularly just do,
Yeah.
right? So
Hmm.
I think that that's a really big piece of it. But I think it's the main two things combined is like having the experience of understanding how to pinpoint and notice trauma, and then also being fiercely dedicated and willing to look at yourself
Hmm.
as an ongoing life process, you know? So I think it has to be those two things together. And it also requires a level of emotional maturity and spiritual maturity that, not everybody has. And that's not to say they can't have it. It just, you have to kind of have a level of self awareness in order to be able to really help people move through things. And you also have to have a level of awareness around when maybe you need to send them somewhere else,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
that's
Yep.
that's a really big thing too, because I think with a lot of people, their ego can get in the way, or they want to be all things to all people because of their own stuff. And then when somebody comes to you, you want to be able to heal them when really that's not what's going to be in their highest good. And I always tell all of my clients in my certification program, if somebody comes to you with this level of trauma, right, that might look like A, B, C, and D, you need to make sure they're working with a
Hmm.
therapist, that
Hmm.
they have a psychiatrist, and they have a team of people, and you are just one of those people, right? You
Yeah.
don't want it to be that they're just solely relying on you, especially if they have these higher levels of trauma. So that's a really important piece too, that we don't want to think that, oh, now I'm just going to like heal this person. That's a
Hmm.
very immature way of looking at it. So yeah, I mean, that I'll leave it there. I probably could go on and on about this, but that's kind of the crux of it from my perspective.
And we will be right back. Hi, friend. It's Tricia Carr with an invitation for you if you are ready to accelerate your ascension and connect to the swift flow of your life mission. Mind Body Ascension Acceleration Coaching. All of my clinical training, my experience from teaching and providing countless sessions and classes, one-on-one, group coaching, healing, reading, teaching, channeling, as well as my calibration as a human design reflector. I'm offering all of this to you to step up your entire life, to accelerate your ascension walk. If you've had a single session with me, if you've had coaching, or if you've experienced transformation from any of my offerings, my classes, podcasts, videos, well, this is an accelerated and exponentially charged. This is what my soul has prepared for an eternity and up to now. And if you hear this call, then this is also co-created with your soul. Your life is meant to be joy first and a service as a close and integrated second. This coaching is especially tuned for high achievers who want to accelerate their progress on their life mission and create mind-body well-being and higher attunement. Submit to work with me in this powerful container, this premium coaching. If you feel the call, you can do it. I guide, you take action. I hold the resonant projection field, channel your steps, and you take action. The first action step is to fill out an application, the link to which you will find in the description. Be prepared, be ready to upgrade your mind-body ascension and your connection and flow with your spiritual mission. And now back to the show. Yeah, working in scope is what you're talking about. And that's something I teach as well, that we have to operate within scope. And with my hypnotherapy training, and I'm in the second year program of mind body psychology, we learn a lot about what it looks like to work in scope. The scope of my practice is not, if something has a potential medical etiology, a medical, including psychological cause, I can work with that doctor, but I
Mhm.
always get a medical release. I send a letter to the doctor and say, this is the work that I do. Would you like to include me on the team for your patient? And
Right.
but we yeah but I would finish that one session, and I wouldn't do I would just work on maybe some stress release or something like that for that one session, but I wouldn't work with them again unless I had a medical release. Because there are things like with breath work, there's things with hypnotherapy, there are certain types of mental disorders that you have to be very cautious about walking them through mystical concepts, walking them through metaphysical concepts to be able
Mhm.
to, because dissociation and, anyway, the point is it's very important. And I love the thing that you said, we aren't, maybe we're not their healer is the thing we have to learn too. And if you take yourself out of the way of being in the way of possibly being their healer, then they'll be able to find their healer, whether it's a doctor
Right.
or another facilitator of some kind. And it's really, yeah. So I think you're just giving such a full, rounded training that is so needed, so very needed.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's really special, and I love the way that it's evolved. It's coming up on a year that since I started it, and just now seeing, people come through it and it's a 9-month program. So I just have had a
Good.
group of people, finish it, and just to see the way that they are implementing it in such a variety of ways too. I have a
Hmm.
woman who is a weight loss coach, and now, she uses breath work for
Yeah.
that. And then I have another woman who was a physical therapist, and now she incorporates all of that stuff, has kind of created her own methodology. And that's the thing too that I really stress in all of my work is I don't want you to just take, like, yes, when you take my program, you'll become a metamorphosis method certified consultant. You can use that. You're on my website, all of that. However, I want you to take it and make it your own. And
Yeah.
I want you to create your own way of doing things, because everyone has such a specific medicine that they're meant to share with the world, like their specific frequency.
Hmm.
So the purpose of all of these tools is so that you can integrate them into your own practice, and
Hmm.
that's what I love about everyone who's come through, and just looking at the way that they've done that, it really makes me so happy. I remember the first time I saw one of the offers that one of my clients in the certification program put out. It was like a trauma healing container, and I started crying because I was like, this is the vision that I
Yeah.
had. Like, I wanted other people to be able to do this, and it's happening. And it's just like
Hmm.
such a freeing and light, happy, wonderful, satisfying feeling.
Yeah. You know what you said, you're talking about, you want your students and your clients, your graduates, to integrate it and to their own specific medicine to synthesize the tools. I won't mention the program, but a friend of mine was about to sign up for a certain training program. And before she signed up, there was a contract she had to sign that said that she wouldn't use it in conjunction with anything else, and that she would only
Mm.
use it exactly as it was taught. And I'm like, well, people that sign that are just, they're either ignorant or they're lying, because it's not even possible.
No, it's not possible, and
Yeah.
it actually, I think, takes away from the potency of it,
Mhm.
because you have to kind of allow things to come through the person in the way that they're
Yeah.
meant to, and if someone's just, like, following these, like, steps, it's almost, like, robotic, and I don't
Mhm.
think they would get the same result as if they, allowed it to integrate into who they are.
Exactly. Yes, that's something that I was just talking to one of my mentees yesterday in, finishing a training program. And, they get a little bit like, in a certain point of the training and education, they're like, there's so many things, and how do I use them, and in what order, and everything. I'm like, you just show up,
Mhm.
and it'll come up out of you. And it's not only going to be the things you learned in this training, but it's going to be what you learned in this other career you had, and this other thing that you did, and this other thing that you learned. Everything that we move through, including our trauma, is our tools, our tools. And I get chills when I think about that. Like you said, we have to be continually doing our own self-healing and self-introspection. That's where our tools are. That's how.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you have to be continuously willing to do that, and look at places that might have been blind spots for you before and being willing to know that there's things you don't know
Mhm.
and just to always be open to that.
And to the point of healing trauma, and especially if you have the proper guide who is, uh, knows trauma and is trauma informed, can you speak to the process with the proper guide, with the proper facilitator, that it is actually an alleviation of pain? Because I know our trauma is so painful that we avoid it because we think if we open it that we're going to be injured by it, when in fact the process, appropriate process, is only alleviating what the pain level that you're already in, and it's just going to
Yeah.
be easing it. How do you
Well, yeah.
speak to people who are afraid to access and process their trauma?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things with this. One is there's so much alleviation in just the acknowledgement of
Yes.
it,
Yes.
which also is what's the word? Like it makes it even more satisfying and alleviating when someone witnesses you
Yes.
in that acknowledgement, right? Where somebody
Mhm.
can actually pinpoint it for you better than you could even say it, right? And I don't mean
Mhm.
better, but I mean in a way that is so validating to you that you couldn't have thought of on your own because there's a way where you still haven't even fully processed it or didn't fully
Mhm.
make sense of it. Because a lot of the things that have happened when we were kids and we didn't have the intellectual capacity, the emotional capacity, or sometimes even the verbal capacity to make sense of it or to process it. So a lot of what we are holding and what we are kind of re-experiencing are these like fragmented energies that we're not even sure how to make sense of or how to integrate them and shift them. So when someone else is able to witness you and then take what you're saying and what your energy is and say it to you in a way that's like so validating and acknowledging, and it makes you feel like, oh, it makes sense now. Now I understand why I've been coming up against this, or now I understand why I've been feeling this way. And now I have a lens that I can look at things through that it makes sense. And now I have choice, right?
Mhm.
Now I can
Mhm.
say, like, okay, the version of me that is beyond this, who's not operating from this wounding anymore, what does it feel like to be that person, right? And then you get to step forward into that new version of you who doesn't have to be operating this way anymore. But the only way you can do that is if you know, is if you can see. So that is a huge piece of it. And that actually doesn't hurt at all. Like, yes, it may hurt to talk about something that happened that was painful, but even though it feels like that's going to be painful, there's usually alleviation in that too, because just by talking about it and getting it out,
Mhm.
it's out, right? It alleviates
Mhm.
things. And then the other thing I just want to say about the breath work piece around this is a lot of times with the breath work, you can shift things and you can clear things and release things without even having to know what they
Yeah.
are. So
Right.
a lot of times this happens all the time where, you can really shift something and you feel completely different. You have a totally new perspective, or you have an aha about a pattern that you've been playing out or a belief that you've been unknowingly projecting onto the world. And all of a sudden it's shifted. People say this to me all the time.
Mhm.
Like I led an event last month called Freedom, and it was a live breathwork session around embodying these new 5D freedom embodiment codes that I downloaded. And people wrote in the chat, I just became aware of this huge belief that I had around A, B, and C, and it's dissipated, it's gone. Or it's like, oh, I just saw this, wound from my ancestral line, like leaving my body. Or I
Mhm.
just feel totally different. I don't even have words, and that's okay. So there's a way that we can move and shift this stuff without needing to go through every detail or re-experience
Mhm.
every little thing. Like that's not required. And also there's a natural intelligence that the body has that if you allow it the space to do it, it will. So whatever it
Yeah.
is that is ready to be shifted and ready to be cleared, the body knows. So if you give it the space through the breath and you start to move the energy through the breath and you become present with what's there, it will shift because the body just knows what to do and you can trust that. So it's not like you have to figure out like, oh my God, well, there's this thing and there's this thing and I have to
Yeah.
like process them or I have to feel them or I have to go back to all the details. Like that is not required and stuff can be shifted instantaneously sometimes, you know? So
Yes.
so yeah, it's not required to kind of go back and re-experience everything. I think that's a big misconception.
Completely. The thing about so trauma, according to certain psychologists, is it's when there is an event that occurs that we can't possibly process everything. Like you were talking about, if we're pre-verbal or we're children, or it can happen as an adult too. We can't possibly process all of it in the moment or with the tools that we have, so it becomes crystallized literally in our nervous system, like ice
Mhm.
cubes in our nervous system. And breath is an instant healer to the nervous system. We can turn that we have the nervous system works on a toggle between parasympathetic and sympathetic. I know you know
Mhm.
this. I'm just talking to the audience. The sympathetic is the fight flight, and the parasympathetic, we call that rest and digest. And with breath work, you can, if you breathe slow and easily, the sympathetic, the fight flight, cannot be online. So it's just like we can't.
Mhm.
And now it feels like when we're in a panic or we're in fight flight, we forget to breathe, or sometimes it feels like we can't breathe, but we actually can. So, like yours, I just wanted to add to that the breath will just take that. Like you're saying, the mind doesn't have to know it. The emotions just easily release it because the medicine of the breath on the nervous system pinpointing like it's warming up those ice cubes, and you just don't even have to smell the trash as it's being taken out.
Exactly. We would always say you don't have to pick through the trash when you're taking it out. And then just
Exactly.
to add on to that too is also with the breath, you are naturally connected to the quantum field because you are in the present moment when you breathe, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't take a breath in the past and you can't take a breath in the future. You have to be present. So you will automatically be connected to that field of possibility. So whereas
Mhm.
before, if you were holding yourself in a certain box or you were, a lot of times we get into this very old paradigm and or thinking. I can either have it this way or that way. Or if I want to grow
Mhm.
my business, I have to lose my relationship. Or if
Yeah.
I want to do this, I can't do that. Or if I want to, be a good mom, I can't have a business or whatever the things are, right? We do that all
Mhm.
the time.
Yeah.
But when we do the breath, we are in the field of possibility, right? Where
Mhm.
there's only possibility, where anything is possible. So, what you'll find is the more that you do it, the more you're connected with that field of possibility. And then all of a sudden, you can feel the infinite possibilities that are available to you. So, you're less in these box in ways of thinking, these old belief systems, and more in that field of possibility where you can be curious about what else is possible, what else can I create, versus thinking that things have to look and be a certain way. Because a lot of times we do that without even realizing it. I know I do it
Mhm.
too, where I'll have to be like, wait, hold on, what am I doing here? I'm thinking that it can only be this way or that
Yeah.
way. No, there's like infinite possibilities of how it could be.
Mm.
And the breath really helps you to access that.
Yes. So beautiful. I just decided that we're going to call this episode Infinite Possibilities.
Oh, I love that.
I wanted to ask you, are you a parent? Are you a mom?
Yes, I have
Okay.
two kids. Yeah.
Oh, great, good. And because I was curious about how, as a parent, how can you teach, or like how early can you start working your children in breath work? Or how does it work with children, like very
That's
young
it's
children?
it's a good question. It's funny. I'm a big proponent, and obviously I've worked with kids for a really long time. I've worked with parents of kids for a really long time, and I'm a parent myself, and most of my clients are parents. And I am a huge believer in the idea of modeling. I really
Mhm.
truly believe that kids
Yeah.
learn through modeling more than anything else. They do what you do, not what you
Mhm.
say, right? And my
Yeah.
husband always learns that the hard way. My kids love to curse.
Yeah.
um,
Which is
so it's
cute, but it's so hard to not laugh when
so
they curse.
cute. I know. Why is it so cute when kids
It's
curse? It was so funny when I just led a Costa Rica retreat back in April and I brought my husband and my kids, and my son, he has a hard time with like being out of his routine and stuff. So we would bribe him like to go with the flow and we would let him say one curse word a day. So if he went along with everything, then he was allowed to say one curse word. It was so funny. He loved it.
But you know what? That's such a great lesson because I mean, it's okay to curse in life sometimes. Sometimes it's the right thing
Yeah,
to
it's
do, but
sometimes it's
yeah.
warranted,
So
but I always say, "Just don't do it like it's school," whatever.
yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, so I really truly believe that kids learn through modeling. So for me, I'm much more focused on, like, who am I being as a parent? So I've never really there'll be certain things I do with my kids. I'll teach them how to do certain energy work stuff. I'll teach them how to
Mhm.
put bubbles around themselves, especially,
Yeah.
like, with my daughter when she can't sleep, or with my son, he gets like overstimulated sometimes, and I'll teach them how to do a little bit of energy work. I'll do a little bit of breath work sometimes, but it's funny because I don't overly focus on that with my kids at all. Like sometimes when they're really upset, I'll be like, let's take some deep breaths, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
However, I will see them talking about it with other people as if they know everything about it. So it's really funny because, like, one time I was sent a picture of my daughter was leading her class through breath work. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I've never taught her how to do that. Right. Same with my son. Like, he'll talk about that with other people, or he'll show other people how to do it. And I'm like, that's really funny because I never really showed them, but
Yeah.
it's something that I think they just feel like they already know about because
Mhm.
it's what I do.
Yeah.
And it's funny too because now my kids both want to like start their own businesses. Like, my son is 100% sure he's going to be like a famous YouTuber. And my daughter, her most recent thing was she wants to help kids that are scared of like
Oh.
riding their bike or doing something new. Like, she wants to help them like stop being scared. And I'm like, well, it really is very similar to like my husband and I are both entrepreneurs. So
Uh-huh.
it's just funny how they kind of take those things on without you really needing to say anything. And I will have so many clients say to me, especially as they dive deeper into their family and the ancestral trauma and stuff, they're like, oh my gosh, am I fucking up my kid? I don't want to pass this on to them. And
Yeah.
I'm always like, all you need to do is do the work on yourself, and that directly affects your kids. Like, you don't have to do anything else. And I
Yeah.
think it's just such an important thing to say to people because it can
Mhm.
be overwhelming at times to think, oh my gosh, am I passing this on to my kids and all of that? And it's like, as you heal, they heal. And
Yeah.
I would always see that with, as a school counselor, if there was a kid who had a parent who was on drugs or something, and the kid would have all these behavior problems, never do their work, always be getting in trouble. And then as soon as the parent would get clean and be back in their lives, the kid was like a different kid. They'd be doing their homework, they'd be behaving. And it was like a direct reflection of just their parent and what their parent was doing. So it really is a testament to you being the best version of you and your kids just benefiting from that.
Ah, I love that. So beautiful. I taught preschool when I was in my 20s for a bit, and I was like, "Oh, I don't it's so hard to do, not because I don't love children, but sometimes being around children is like being around their parents on their worst behavior." And it breaks your heart then.
Oh my God. Yes.
But it's
Yes.
also when you're on your best behavior, your children are going to be that as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm. This has been so incredible. What are some ways that people can work with you right now? What do you have going on that invitations or, access to you?
Yeah. Yeah. So right now, I don't know when this is gonna to air.
Usually a few weeks, something like that, yeah. So, maybe in
Okay.
June, late June or something, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, my the metamorphosis is always rolling, and that's such a great place to start with me, especially if you're interested in clearing the familial and ancestral trauma. Even if you've done work around this, just to have the tools that I share, I think everyone needs to have access to these tools. So that's a great place to start. There's two options to come in. There's the group option, or there's the option that includes one-on-one. I think that's a great place to start. Also, my certification is always rolling, and my mastermind accelerated wealth are always rolling. Another thing that I have like limited access for is I do Akashic Records readings very
Nice.
sparsely.
Mhm.
So you can sign up for one of those through my website. And when we have room, my assistant will schedule you for one of those. If you didn't want to dive into a program, it's like a great way to just have access to my energy and see, what is next for you, and for me to really dive in with you around your purpose and, just kind of what is blocking you from that next level. That's usually what I see in the Akashic records all the time. So that's a great option too. And then just follow me, because I always have smaller programs going around different things. Like right now, I have a client attraction 4-week mastermind that's going to be in June. So I'm always doing little things like that as well.
Wonderful. Wow, Alyse, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing so much, such a wealth of support, light, and wisdom. I really appreciate you and the work that you're doing in our beautiful world. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Breathwork is the medicine that we all need. Something I didn't mention in our conversation, I didn't get a chance to, so I'll share it with you all. And that is before I had this career, I was in poverty for most of my life because that was what was modeled to me. And I was in hospitality for, I don't even know, 25 years, maybe something like that. Because I started when I was a teenager. It was my, very first work that I ever did. And in my adulthood, I was a server, I was a manager, but I always went back to service because you make more money usually than you do as a manager in restaurants and bars. But I'd be somewhere in between that, and I would still be in service. I wound up with my career in hospitality as a bartender, and I don't mean this to brag, but a high level one in this kind of big renaissance in Los Angeles with the cocktail mixology awakening that we had. And then that led to a different tier of that career as a director of mixology for a national distributor of wines and spirits, which meant that I went around to bars and restaurants all over Southern California and taught them how to make culinary cocktails and, to sell the products of the company that I worked for. At any rate, when I had actually moved out of the bartending side of it and moved to the distribution and the training side of it for the wine and spirits distributor. But I was still involved with the bartender community in Los Angeles. We had this one workshop where we provided a trainer. He was a physical therapist who we were having people come up and make a couple of cocktails, and then he would, observe you and assess your form and give you tips about how you can, change your posture, stand differently, move differently, so that it would be more ergonomic and, not cause you as much pain and injury. So I went up and did it because I wasn't behind the bar, but I still made cocktails a lot in my trainings to be able to train people how to make, have culinary cocktails for their spots. And so I did it. I made a cocktail that was shaken and I made a cocktail that was stirred. I presented them. And then the first thing that this physical therapist said to me was, he said, "Did you know that when you shake and stir, you stop breathing, you hold your breath?" And I seriously cracked up the way that I am now. I'm like, oh, well, that's a good idea. Why don't I just stop living for most of my job? That's essentially what I'm doing. I'm opting out of living. And I'm definitely, as Alyse talked about, by connecting to breath, you are connecting with the field of infinite possibilities. You're connecting with the quantum field. Well, I was opting out of that field. But you know what? Because I had a trauma bond with that work, with that career, it was very, very difficult for me to be in that job, to be in that career. Now, it moved me forward in my life and a little at a time, but as all things do. But I just found it really interesting. I was thinking about it as Alyse and I were talking, that my trauma came powerfully online when I did those couple of, those tasks, the way that I did those behaviors of stirring or shaking. And I thought back to when I was behind the bar and I would work sometimes 10-hour shifts, and how many times I stopped breathing probably. how many times I got locked in my trauma in all of those moments. That was a huge lesson for me. And I have ever since then. And then, of course, since I had my spiritual awakening already at that time, I just hadn't quit the old career entirely yet, had the leap as that Alyse had quite yet. But yeah, I have since then really been dedicated to the breath. I use it in all of my hypnotherapy. I'm a mentor to hypnotherapists now, and the ones who are still going through their program at HMI College of Hypnotherapy. And that's I get asked a lot when I'm teaching or mentoring, what do you use as an induction? And I said, oh, well, I always use breath, because if they just came in and they have a few moments of you guiding you through breathing and guiding them through relaxation and calming the body and regulating the nervous system, then that's worth whatever they paid you, because having that guidance, having a container to do that and facilitating that is just so powerful. In addition to, as Alyse was talking about, being able to speak about what's going on for you, that is healing. To release it, to alleviate it by just simply releasing it from you with a safe space to do that. So anyway, both the counseling and the hypnotherapy and the breath work, this is the medicine that is so valuable for us and helps us to continue to remove those blocks, remove limiting beliefs, and to be in alignment with your highest purpose, be on that ascension path. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Alyse Bacine. Please do check the show notes for all of Alyse's offerings and, of course, mine as well, the programs that I have coming up. And yes, I do have one-on-one services available. You can find all of that in the show notes. And we have more incredible episodes coming up for you soon, both with incredible guests like Alyse and solo episodes that I do here and there. And that's what we have for you in this episode. So thank you for shining your light on our beautiful world. And thanks for tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.